So I'm here by myself today with the Miata, and last time we worked on this thing, we did a fan switch, we made some new coil brackets, but also that was the first time since we did a heater core job on this car that we actually were able to fill this whole thing up with water and make sure there's no leaks or anything like that. The good news is we didn't see any leaks anywhere. We filled it up and ran it. There was no dripping from the heater core side. There was no dripping from the coolant reroute in the back, which is great, and that's good news for me. But after bleeding and burping it for about 20 minutes or so, there was still some small bubbles that just kept coming up, and I'm kind of afraid that it might have blown the head gasket when the heater core blew. I really hope not, but I got a Leakdown tester from a friend, and you know, if you want to test something like this, you could do a compression test if you want to, see if compression's lower in that cylinder. But the Leakdown tester tells you a lot more of the story than a compression tester does. All that gives you is a number telling you what the compression is. A Leakdown tester, I will show you guys what I'm using, show you guys how to use it. But the idea of it is you're basically forcing air from a compressor or something into the cylinder, and then you listen from the exhaust, you listen from the oil cap, you can listen from the dipstick, you listen from the throttle plate, and also listen to the from the cylinders next to the one you're testing for leaks going through there. And it can just give you a lot more information on what's going on in the car. Now, I was going to do this anyways because since I'm turboing the car, I want to make sure everything's healthy and everything's good and at least get an idea of what I'm dealing with. But now I actually have some reason to suspect there might be an issue, so I would like to figure that out. And anyway, I'm going to go ahead and start working on this. I'll show you guys kind of what I'm doing, do a little time-lapsey stuff probably, and then I'll explain the compression test, or not compression, explain the Leakdown tester and perform the test. So I pulled the spark plug wires and then pulled all 4 spark plugs out. I took the intake off so that it's out of the way, and then I also want to be able to get to the throttle plate a little bit later on. The next thing you're going to want to do is get a 21mm socket and put it on your crankshaft, because you're going to need to try and find top dead center for each of these as you do them. We're going to start with cylinder number 1 on the front. So put a 21mm onto the crankshaft, get a long screwdriver and set that down into piston number 1. Okay, so you want to set the screwdriver into cylinder number 1 first, because that's the one we're going to start with. And we're going to put the engine at top dead center, because when the piston's at top dead center, that will mean the intake valves and the exhaust valves should also be closed. So you're going to take your 21mm here, put it on the crankshaft, and that long screwdriver should tell us when it's at the top. Whoop. So now you can see it got pushed up. And once it just starts to go down again, then we passed it. Okay, so we just a hair past it, and I'll go back just a little bit. Okay. Cool. All right, right there is top dead center. So you can take your screwdriver out. You may as well just leave that on the crankshaft. And now let me get the Leakdown tester and show you guys how that works. So this is a Leakdown tester right here. Now it's got air line on this side, so you hook that up to an air hose from your compressor, and then this side right here, it's got another hose that goes into the engine, so let me pop that in, there we go. And then this side screws into your spark plug hole, and that's how that hooks up. Now it's got 2 gauges on it, and one gauge is going to tell you what the pressure coming from the compressor is, and the other gauge is going to tell you your leakage, like how much is actually leaking. Every engine is going to have some leakage. It's just a matter of how much leakage and where it's coming from, and that's what's important to you. So I'm going to go ahead and hook this up into cylinder number 1 now, and let's see what the gauge says, and then let's listen around the car, and I'll show you the spots that you need to check and see what it has to say. So this thing's hooked up now. I just plugged the compressor into it and it is reading low on this gauge, which is a good thing. That means it doesn't have too much leakage. Now I can still hear a hiss coming from somewhere. Like I said, there will always be a little bit usually. So what I need to do now is find out where it's coming from. So let me look around, and when I find it, I'll tell you, and I'll show you all the spots to listen to. So I moved the compression tester actually a little bit away over to the side because there is a small amount of hissing coming from that, from the excess pressure. Anyways, I don't want that hissing noise from this to confuse me with what else I'm listening for. So we want to check the intake valves by opening the throttle body, because if air is leaking past them, you will hear it through the intake manifold. And it's like a ever so slight, just a barely little. Not much though, which is a good thing. Now after I checked the intake valves by listening through here, while I'm up at the front of the engine, I want to go ahead and take off the oil cap here and listen there for crankcase pressure. And there is some crankcase leakage, I can hear it, which means that it's coming from the piston rings, probably, going past the piston rings. Okay, well, another thing to consider too is you can heat the engine up before doing this. And it's possible that if this engine was running warm, that the rings would expand and set right, and then you wouldn't be hearing that noise anymore. Either way though, it's not bad. I can hear it, and it's like a noise, like a wind noise almost a little bit, but it's not very loud. And at least the dial on the leak down tester here is telling me that it's not a bad leak. So that's a good thing. And next I would like to probably listen from here. So I'm actually going to get like a vacuum line or something and stick it down into cylinder 2 to listen, just because it's kind of hard to get my ear in here. So I'm just going to set this down into here, this vacuum line, and then stick the other end up to my ear and listen. Okay, I don't really hear much in there. There might be like a very, very faint hiss. But like I said, I can't hear much from there. So next I'm gonna go listen at the exhaust. This is the most graceful one right here. You gotta get your face down here. I can hear a faint hissing noise from there as well. So there's a little bit of leakage there. It's not bad though. Okay, so those are the main things you want to check when you're doing a leak down test. Just to recap real fast, I checked going through the throttle body to listen for intake noise coming from there. Very, very faint hiss. I checked from the exhaust to listen for noise, or not noise, air getting past the exhaust valves. Another very faint hiss noise, not very loud. And then I checked in the crankcase by just pulling the oil cap. You can also pull the dipstick and stick your ear against there if you'd like to do that as well. And there was more air going past from those two spots than the rest. But one thing, like I mentioned, is that that could change easily when the engine's warmed up and has been running. This one has not. I didn't warm it up before I did this. But overall, the leak down tester is showing only about 15% leakage, which is really not bad actually. For a brand new engine, might have 5 to 10%. A good condition street engine might be 10 to 20%, somewhere around there. If you start getting past 20, 25, 30, engine's probably still okay to drive around. But once you start getting over that, it means that motor's pretty much had its time and you're gonna need to replace it probably or rebuild it. But that's a good sign though actually. 15% on the first cylinder I'm very happy with. Now I'm just gonna cross my fingers and I'm gonna check the rest of them and see what I come up with. And now that I'm doing cylinder 2, by the way, just make sure you check in cylinder 1 and cylinder 3, listening for air getting by. So I just finished testing all 3 of the rest of them. Cylinder 1 actually was the healthiest, it was the best, but none of them had anything too bad going on. Cylinder number 1 was at about 15%. Cylinder number 2 is at about 22 to 23%. And then number 3 and 4 were both about 25 to 26%. So honestly, I'm not unhappy with those numbers. This engine has been beat on plenty, and most of the leakage from all of them, by the way, was from the rings. And that's something that actually probably would go away if you warmed the engine up, or at least get better. So one more thing I did not mention while I was telling you to listen places and check. Pull your radiator cap off there, and I actually went back and redid number 1 and 2 because I forgot about it. But pull your radiator cap, make sure your fluid's full, and watch there for bubbles or anything else, because that could mean that you have a cracked head or cracked somewhere, or a cracked bad head gasket. So anyway, those numbers at least there I'm pretty happy with. Like I said, I think they're pretty good, and you know, I guess I should just drive the car and see if the head gasket's bad. It'll get worse. And if it's okay, then great. That means I don't have to do a head job on it. So anyways, thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys found this helpful. And I'm sure I don't need to show you how to put your spark plugs and wires back in. You can probably figure that out. But I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Hopefully go drive the car and see how it drives. And maybe soon we'll be starting more stuff on this thing. So thank you for watching as always. Check out our Instagram and Facebook if you guys haven't done that yet. And don't forget, keep wrenching.